Greetings, dear seekers of the shadowed path, and welcome to another sojourn into the heart of darkness. Tonight, beneath the whispering cloak of night, we delve into a tale woven with threads of terror and shrouded in the mist of the macabre. I am your guide, Night Angel, here to lead you through the twisted corridors of Nosferatu, a tale that has chilled the bones of many a brave soul. In the annals of Gothic horror, few stories have stirred the blood as Nosferatu has. Originally emerging from the depths of early cinematic horror, it is a tale that transcends time, its dark roots entangled deeply within our collective psyche. But tonight we part the veil of the known and venture into a realm more sinister, more ensnaring than ever before. Imagine, if you will, a world cloaked in perpetual twilight, where the line between the living and the undead is as tenuous as a spider's silk. Our narrative unfolds through the eyes of one Jonathan Harker, a man whose fate becomes irrevocably intertwined with that of a creature most foul, most unnerving. As we traverse this reimagined landscape, be prepared to witness a story not just of horror, but of obsession, of a darkness that claws not only at the body, but also gnaws relentlessly at the soul. Jonathan Harker, a character as timeless as the fear he embodies, will be your narrator through this harrowing journey. Through his eyes, you will explore the eerie realms of Nosferatu, each shadow a whisper, each silence a scream. His perspective will guide you through winding roads shrouded in mist to a castle that looms like a sentinel of despair, and into the presence of an entity that is the very embodiment of nocturnal dread. But be forewarned, for as we peel back the layers of this chilling saga, the grip of Nosferatu will tighten. You will find yourself walking the fine line between reality and nightmare, between the safety of daylight and the perilous allure of the dark. As we embark on this journey together, remember, there is no turning back. The shadows we awaken tonight will linger, their caress cold upon your spine, their whispers echoing in the recesses of your mind. So steel your nerves, light your candles, and prepare to step into a world where the boundaries of horror are not just crossed, but shattered. In the chilling words of Jonathan Harker, whose life became a testament to the terror that is Nosferatu, I write this account in the hope that it will never be read. For in its reading, the darkness awakens. And now, let the darkness awaken. Let us begin. In the year of our Lord 1897, a peculiar correspondence fell upon my desk, casting the first shadow upon the unblemished canvas of my mundane existence. The letter, sealed with an emblem unknown to my eyes, bore an invitation that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. It was an invitation from a Count Orlok, requesting my presence at his castle, nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains. The nature of my profession as a solicitor often led me to the doorsteps of the unusual, but this was unlike any commission I had undertaken. The Count's request was laced with enigmas, his words elegantly penned yet cryptic, speaking of matters urgent and of great import, yet shrouded in veils of ambiguity. As I sat in my study, the letter in hand, a sense of unease began to unfurl within me. The Count's name was one unheard of in my social circles or in the annals of my profession. What business could such a personage have with me, a simple solicitor from London? My mind churned with questions, but above all, there lingered an insatiable curiosity, a draw towards the unknown that I could scarce explain. I remember the night that followed, restless and filled with strange dreams, where shadows twisted into grotesque shapes and whispered in tongues foreign to my waking ear. The morning found me pale and perturbed, yet resolute in my decision. I would journey to this remote castle, to the heart of the mountains where ancient secrets lay buried beneath stone and soil. The preparations for my departure were swift. I bade farewell to my beloved Mina, her eyes clouded with concern, her words beseeching caution. I promised her a swift return, little knowing the fates that conspired against such a vow. My journey commenced under a sky of sullen gray, the sun a dim specter behind a veil of ominous clouds. As the train wound its way through the countryside, the landscape transformed before my eyes. The lush greenery of the English countryside gave way to rugged terrain, the mountains rising like ancient titans, their peaks shrouded in mists that seemed to whisper secrets of a bygone age. The further the train carried me, the more isolated I felt, as if venturing into a world forgotten by time and man. Villages grew sparse, and the faces of the people I glimpsed bore a wariness, their eyes darting and quick to avoid my own. It was as though the very air grew heavier, laden with unspoken dread and tales untold. Upon my arrival at the nearest township to the Count's domain, I found myself amidst people who spoke in hushed tones and cast furtive glances towards the looming mountains. My inquiries about Count Orlok were met with averted gazes and crossed fingers, their words scarce and tinged with fear. A chill ran down my spine, yet my resolve remained firm. The enigma of Count Orlok beckoned me, drawing me towards the shadows that lay ahead. The carriage ride to the castle was a journey unto itself, the path winding and treacherous. As the carriage traversed the rugged path that serpentined through the heart of these forsaken mountains, I felt as though I was journeying not merely through space, but through time itself. The world I knew, a world of buzzing electric lights and the clamor of humanity, seemed to dissolve with each mile, leaving in its stead a landscape that whispered of ancient, unspeakable things. The trees, gnarled and ancient, stood as silent sentinels, their twisted forms casting grotesque shadows that flickered in the lantern's dim light. The path wound ever upwards, the air growing colder, the mist thicker, as if the very atmosphere sought to smother the life from my lungs. An oppressive silence hung over the land, broken only by the occasional distant howl that seemed neither animal nor human. My driver, a man of grizzled countenance and scarce words, urged the horses on with an urgency that belied a deep-seated fear. In his eyes I saw reflections of dread that I dared not voice, a terror born not of the known, but of legends whispered in the dark corners of taverns and hearths. As the sun began its descent behind the jagged peaks, casting the world into a twilight of purples and grays, I glimpsed for the first time the outline of my destination. The castle of Count Orlok loomed before us, a monolith of stone and shadow, rising from the mountain as if it were a natural extension of the rock itself. Its towers pierced the sky, stark against the dying light, windows dark and uninviting. The architecture of the edifice spoke of an age long past, its walls adorned with grotesques and gargoyles that seemed to leer down at me with stony eyes. Vines clung to the masonry like desperate hands, their tendrils dark against the pale stone. The air around the castle was chill and still, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Upon our approach, the massive gates creaked open, as though some unseen sentinel had granted us passage. The sound echoed through the courtyard, a mournful groan that sent a shiver down my spine. The courtyard itself was a desolate expanse of cobblestones, overgrown with weeds that cracked the ancient stones. The carriage came to a halt, and I stepped out into the twilight, my gaze drawn upwards to the towering facade of the castle. The door, heavy and ornate, stood ajar, as if Count Orlok had been awaiting my arrival with bated breath. I gathered my resolve, my heart pounding in my chest, and crossed the threshold into the unknown. Inside, the castle was a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The walls were lined with tapestries that depicted scenes both majestic and macabre, their colors faded with time. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that penetrated the gloom, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect. The grand hall was a cavernous space, the ceiling lost in shadows, the floor a mosaic of tiles that told tales of conquest and tragedy. Statues, their features eroded by the passage of centuries, lined the walls, their expressions somber and accusatory. I felt a sense of history within these walls, a history steeped in blood and darkness. It was as though the very stones whispered secrets of the past, secrets that were best left undisturbed. I could not shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking my every move. As I ventured deeper into the bowels of the castle, the sense of unease grew. The corridors twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the fortress. Paintings of long-dead nobles adorned the walls, their eyes following me with a disconcerting intensity. And then, at the end of a long dark corridor, I saw him, Count Orlok. He stood motionless, his back to me, gazing out of a tall window that overlooked the darkening landscape. His presence was as chilling as the grave, and in that moment I knew that I had entered into a realm far removed from the world of the living. As I stood in the dimly lit corridor of that ancient castle, my eyes fell upon the figure of Count Orlok. The first sight of him struck a chord of deep unease within me, one that resonated with every tale of dread I had ever heard. There, before me, stood a being who seemed less a man and more a shadow given form. His stature was imposing, yet unnaturally gaunt, as if the life within him had been drained and left a husk of a man. His skin, pallid and stretched taut over sharp, protruding bones, had the sheen of death about it, but it was his eyes that ensnared my gaze and filled my soul with a cold dread. They were dark, abyssal pools, lacking the warmth of human life, yet burning with a sinister intensity that seemed to pierce through me, reading my very thoughts. His movements were peculiar, a disjointed elegance that was as mesmerizing as it was unsettling. Each gesture was deliberate, almost predatory, as though he were a creature unaccustomed to the confines of human form. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a whispering hiss, a sound that seemed to slither through the air and coil around me. "Welcome, Jonathan Harker," he intoned, each syllable dripping with an unspoken threat. "Your journey has been long. I trust you will find the accommodations to your liking." His words, though courteous, carried an undercurrent of mockery, and I found myself momentarily at a loss. Gathering my composure, I responded with as much politeness as I could muster, all the while feeling his gaze upon me like the touch of a spider's web, cold, clinging, and inescapable. As I followed him through the castle, the air seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker. The Count's presence filled the space, a suffocating aura that threatened to overwhelm my senses. The castle itself appeared to respond to his passing, the very walls whispering secrets in a language not meant for mortal ears. It was not long before I began to notice the strange occurrences that plagued the castle's halls. Doors would creak open only to slam shut with no discernible cause. The flickering candles cast grotesque shadows that moved of their own accord, twisting into shapes that defied reason. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of something unseen, moving in the depths of the castle. My sleep, when it came, was fitful and plagued by nightmares. I dreamt of shadows that whispered my name, of eyes that watched me from the darkness. Each morning I awoke feeling as though I had not slept at all, my mind a mire of exhaustion and fear. As the days passed, my interactions with the Count became increasingly fraught. His questions about my work, my life in London, were probing and invasive, yet delivered with a veneer of genteel interest. I began to feel as though I were an insect under a microscope, my every move observed and analyzed for purposes I dared not contemplate. The castle seemed to close in around me, its corridors a maze from which there was no escape. The Count's presence was ever present, a looming specter that haunted my every step. I felt trapped, ensnared in a web that I could neither see nor understand. It was during one of my restless wanderings that I stumbled upon a room that chilled my blood. Shelves lined with ancient tomes filled the space, their pages filled with arcane symbols and languages long forgotten. But it was the centerpiece of the room that held my gaze, a coffin, its lid ajar, revealing a glimpse of the velvet-lined interior. The realization of what I had discovered struck me like a physical blow. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a terrifying clarity. The Count's nocturnal habits, his aversion to daylight, his unnerving appearance, all pointed to a truth that I could no longer deny. Count Orlok was no mere man, he was something else entirely, a creature of the night, a being whose very existence was the stuff of nightmares, and I, Jonathan Harker, had walked willingly into his lair. In the shrouded hours of the night, when the castle was enveloped in a suffocating silence, I found myself unable to succumb to the embrace of sleep. Compelled by a mixture of dread and an insatiable desire for the truth, I ventured through the dimly lit corridors, my footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stone. The castle, under the cloak of darkness, took on a more sinister aspect. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist into grotesque shapes, and the intermittent flash of lightning cast fleeting, nightmarish visions upon the walls. I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me, tracking my every move with malevolent intent. As I delved deeper into the heart of this Gothic labyrinth, I stumbled upon a chamber that chilled my very soul. Within this room I found artifacts and tomes that spoke of unspeakable rituals and forbidden knowledge. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and upon a great table lay a map, its lines charting courses to far and unknown lands, marked with symbols that made my blood run cold. The most harrowing discovery, however, lay hidden behind a heavy tapestry. Pulling it aside, I uncovered an alcove wherein rested a series of coffins. Each was adorned with carvings so ghastly, so unholy, that I dared not recount them here. But it was the contents of these coffins that revealed the true horror of Count Orlok's nature. Within each lay a figure, deathly pale and still, as if carved from marble. Their eyes, closed in eternal slumber, bore an expression of suffering and malevolence that transcended death. I realized with a horror that gripped my very being that these were the undead, the vampiric minions of the Count, lying in wait for their nocturnal resurrection. I recoiled from the sight, my heart pounding with a terror that threatened to overwhelm me. The realization that I was trapped within the lair of a creature so vile, so abhorrent to the natural order, was a bitter pill to swallow. I was a prisoner in a castle of horrors, a mere plaything at the mercy of a being whose existence defied all reason. As I retraced my steps, the castle seemed to mock me with its oppressive stillness. The portraits on the walls, once benign, now leered at me with an unsettling awareness. I could feel Count Orlok's presence, a suffocating darkness that pervaded every corner of the castle. Upon returning to my chamber, I found no solace. The windows revealed only the storm-ravaged night, the flashes of lightning illuminating the desolate landscape that surrounded the castle. I was isolated, cut off from the world of the living, ensnared in a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. In those long, torturous hours of the night, I pondered my fate. Would I become like those other wretched souls doomed to an existence of eternal darkness, bound to the will of Count Orlok? The very thought was enough to drive one to the brink of madness. As dawn approached, bringing with it the first faint light of hope, I resolved to find a way to escape this accursed place. I would not succumb to the fate that had befallen those who had come before me. With the coming of the new day, I would begin to plot my escape, to return to the world of the living, to the warmth of the sun's embrace. But as the first rays of dawn crept through the cracks of the castle, I knew that the night's revelations had changed me. I was no longer the man who had entered Count Orlok's domain. I had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back into me. In the wake of my harrowing discoveries, Each moment within the confining walls of Count Orlok's castle was a descent into an abyss of terror. The once grand halls, which I had traversed with a sense of wonder, now became a labyrinth of dread. Each shadow seemed to conceal unspeakable horrors, each creaking door a portent of doom. My resolve to escape this nightmarish stronghold was fueled by a terror not solely for my own life, but for the lives of those I held dear. The realization that Count Orlok's malevolent gaze could extend beyond these cursed walls, reaching out to the innocent, spurred my desperate attempts to flee. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, heralding another night of unspeakable dread, I began to enact my plan. With every step, I felt the weight of the Count's sinister presence, as though he were a specter hanging over my very being. The castle, an entity unto itself, seemed to resist my every move, its winding corridors and hidden passageways a maze designed to ensnare the unwary. In my efforts to find egress, I stumbled upon a chamber, a grotesque library filled with ancient tomes and manuscripts that spoke of dark rituals and forbidden lore. It was here that I uncovered the true extent of Orlok's diabolical intent. Amidst the arcane script, I found references to a curse most vile, one that threatened to spread like a plague from this desolate keep to the bustling streets of my own beloved homeland. The realization struck me with the force of a thunderclap. Orlok sought not merely to dominate this desolate region, but to cast his shadow over all of humanity. My escape was no longer a matter of personal survival. It was a race against time to thwart a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. But the Count was no mere mortal adversary. As I navigated the darkened passages, his presence was ever palpable, a suffocating force that seemed to drain the very air from my lungs. I encountered him in the grand hall, his figure emerging from the shadows like a wraith. His eyes, devoid of all humanity, bore into me, and I felt the grip of a paralyzing fear. Our confrontation was brief, yet in those fleeting moments I glimpsed the depth of the abyss that was Count Orlok. He spoke in riddles and threats, his voice a serpent's hiss that coiled around my soul. I evaded him, using my knowledge of the castle's layout gained over those dreadful days. The final leg of my escape was a maddening rush through darkness, the castle's oppressive energy clawing at my heels. I emerged into the night, the howling wind and lashing rain a symphony to my frenzied flight. As I fled through the dense forest that bordered the castle, the sounds of pursuit filled the air, a cacophony of shrieks and howls that chilled the blood. Reaching the relative safety of the carriage awaiting me at the forest's edge, I urged the driver to spare no haste. As we descended the treacherous mountain pass, I dared not look back, for fear of what might be following. The journey back to civilization was a blur, my mind reeling with the horrors I had witnessed, and the ominous threat that I had narrowly escaped. Yet, even as the distance grew between myself and that accursed castle, I knew that the shadows of Count Orlok's dark ambition would loom over me, a specter from which there could be no true escape. My return to the familiar streets of my hometown was tainted with a terror that clung to me like a shroud. The journey, which once filled me with a sense of homecoming, now seemed a descent into a waking nightmare. Each shadow cast by the passing streetlights, each unfamiliar face that glanced my way, sparked a fear deep within my chest that Count Orlok's curse had followed me, a malevolent specter clinging to my very soul. The town, once a haven of tranquility and order, now appeared to me as a stage set for an unspeakable drama. The people I had known all my life seemed like actors unknowingly playing their parts in a play scripted by unseen sinister forces. My own home, which should have been a sanctuary, felt like a prison, the walls whispering secrets I dared not comprehend. As the days passed, my paranoia burgeoned into an obsession. I saw signs of the Count's presence everywhere, in the pale countenance of a passerby, in the elongated shadows at dusk, in the strange new illnesses that whispered through the town. The dread of bringing the curse upon my own kin, upon Mina, my beloved, became an unbearable burden, a torment that haunted my every waking moment. Then, as inevitable as nightfall, came the final confrontation with Count Orlok. It happened on a night when the moon hung heavy in the sky, a silent witness to our fateful encounter. He materialized from the shadows, his figure a blight against the moonlit streets, his presence a chilling affirmation of my darkest fears. The Count, his visage more ghastly than ever in the familiar setting of my town, confronted me with a malevolence that transcended physical form. His words, a venomous cascade, promised not just my doom, but the downfall of all I held dear. The battle that ensued was not just a clash of flesh and blood, but a struggle for my very soul. I fought with a desperation born of love and terror, my every strike fueled by the need to protect my home from the dark contagion that Orlok embodied. The streets became our battleground, the silent houses the mute witnesses to our struggle. The physical combat was grueling, but it was the psychological warfare that Orlok waged that nearly undid me. His taunts, designed to instill despair and hopelessness, echoed in the recesses of my mind, a symphony of dread that sought to erode my resolve. But in the depths of that despair I found a glimmer of strength, a steadfast determination that I would not succumb to the darkness. The final moments of our confrontation were a blur, a maelstrom of fury and fear. In a climactic struggle, I managed to turn the tide, using my intimate knowledge of the town to my advantage. The Count, realizing that his grip on me was loosening, unleashed a ferocity that was truly otherworldly. But as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, it brought with it a sliver of hope. Count Orlok, his power waning in the purifying light of the sun, retreated into the shadows from whence he came, his curse lifted, his hold over me broken. As the sun rose, casting its golden light over the town, I felt a weight lift from my heart. The terror that had gripped me was gone, replaced by a weary relief. But the scars of that encounter, both physical and psychological, would remain with me forever. I had faced the darkness and survived, but at what cost? In the aftermath of that night, as life in the town slowly returned to its mundane rhythm, I knew that my tale would be met with disbelief by many. But for those who had witnessed the shadows that had descended upon our town, there would always be a lingering question, a question of what lurks in the darkness, waiting for its moment to strike. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful night, as I sit here penning the final words of this harrowing account, I find myself a changed man. The world around me has resumed its customary rhythm, but within me there stirs a perpetual disquiet. The encounter with Count Orlok has left an indelible mark on my soul, a scar that time cannot heal. Though the immediate terror has subsided, a lingering fear remains, a whisper in the dark, suggesting that the horror is not truly vanquished. In the stillness of the night, when the world sleeps, I find myself listening for the echo of Orlok's malevolence, wondering if the battle was truly won. This tale, my solemn testament, is a reminder of the darkness that lies in wait just beyond the edge of light. For in the shadows of our world, ancient and unspeakable evils lurk, ever patient, ever hungry. And so I leave you with this chilling thought: the terror of Nosferatu, like the night, is eternal. As the echoes of our tale fade into the silence of the night, I, your guide through the shadows, Night Angel, thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of darkness. Together, we have traversed the chilling corridors of Nosferatu, witnessed the terror that lurks in the unseen, and touched the very essence of fear. As we part ways this evening, let the memories of our Friday Night Frights linger in your thoughts, a reminder of the thrill that only the unknown can provide. Remember, Our exploration into the macabre is but a pause away. Here on the YouTube channel, it gets creepy. May your nights be filled with whispers of the past and shadows that dance just beyond the reach of the light. Until we meet again in this haven of horror, I bid you a haunting good night. Sleep well if you can, and keep the candle burning, for one never knows what might be lurking in the darkness